how many meetings of the Charter Commission we've had.
13, I think this is.
But it's many, and we're getting close. And I think our big issues for today are to approve the meeting minutes from the last public hearing, and then to hear from our attorney about what we should do next. That's what we need to do. So what we need to do first is approve the minutes. Anybody want to make a motion, or have you had a chance to read them?
I move we approve those minutes.
Second?
Second. Who's second?
Nancy was first, I think.
That's fine. I don't read it.
Okay. All those who approve? Aye.
So,
This-
Clint marked me as abstaining because I wasn't here.
Did you get that? Good.
Having a cocktail.
He's, yeah, he was enjoying himself. Okay, moving on. When he's ready.
Yep.
Thanks, Jim.
Binder. Can I?
Yes.
You can, yes.
Yeah. Hi, everybody.
Hello. Go ahead, Jim.
Happy May.
There's only one thing we want to hear from you.
What's that? How's
It's all good.
everything's good so far? I mean, all right. So just we'll do a quick update. The preliminary report was officially delivered on April 19th, which is exactly 3 weeks ago today. So we're at 21 days. Bill touched base with Miles at the Attorney General's office, and we confirmed that they have the report and they are in the review process, and that's all we know. So I don't want to read into that. We'll just leave it at that. They have 45 days from the date of receipt to respond, which would come in the form of some kind of either, approval or objection to specific components. And 45 days from April 19th, according to my calculator, is June 3rd. So hopefully sometime well before that, we'll hear back from them. But they have officially until June 3rd. Our deadline for the final report is June 20th. So we did this intentionally. That's not a lot of time, but there's enough time in that window. If we hear back from the state, they will hopefully, the statute requires them to have specific objections, to state those in writing, and I suspect to propose fixes. And if we get that from the state, we then meet and we can resubmit the report with those corrections made within 30 days of receiving their response. So there's plenty of time in there. We'll schedule a meeting so we have that as a backdrop. But we're at that point now where we're really in the final, we're almost in the fourth quarter, and we have to sort of be prepared for that. In the preliminary report, which has been posted online since we filed it with the clerk and sent it to the state, it's really great piece of work from all of you. There's a legal opinion in the back. I kept it relatively succinct because if there are legal issues, I get the sense that the Attorney General and the Secretary of State's office is going to do a lot of their own digging. But I was really, I have to say, whenever, this is sort of a lawyer thing, you sort of say in the beginning part of a process, like, oh, I think this is my argument, or I think this is where I'm going to come down on this issue, and then you start digging into the law and maybe the history and the legislative history, and at that point you could sort of go either direction. You could start to convince yourself you're wrong, and we've all run into that, and I ran into a situation where I looked at the legislative history, and I was pretty blown away by how clearly I felt the district had like its own pathway to independence. I just really felt like the arguments that we made and the sort of position we're taking and the position that Concord has taken for a long time isn't just like a fabrication of all of our imaginations. It's really quite well supported by the legislative history. Getting everyone else to understand that's sort of another story, but I felt really confident about the positions we took. So that's sort of where we are timeline wise in terms of the preliminary report. We have to begin putting together a final report. I don't envision the final report being a whole lot different than the preliminary report. The components under the statute that are required to be in the final report is the full text of the amendments. One thing that's different is a representation or a presentation of the differences between the proposed new charter and the old or the current charter. So that may be a slightly different way of putting the information forward in the final report. Again, a legal opinion, and we would include, I suspect, the opinion or the response from the state. And Bill and I talked about this, and we've all had the conversation about, are we going to put the proposed ballot questions in there? And so that's kind of the conversation I think we should have today. In that final report, so remember the preliminary report we have the amendments, but then we have all those explanations, and there's 6 proposed amendments. So each one comes with its own narrative, and it's like, let's try to explain this amendment in like succinct, regular, layman's terms, without being confusing, without being too wordy. So the ballot itself is supposed to, the ballot contains the language of the proposed amendment, and then we are supposed to post the proposed amendment with a summary of the amendment. So we have to have a conversation about how we feel about those explanations. Are they right on? Are they too long? Are they too short? Are they too confusing? I feel good about them, but we should just reaffirm that we feel good about those. So in terms of, I'm jumping around, but I'm kind of going through the statutory process. The next official step in the process is we finalize the final report, and once that's done, we're on to getting ready for the ballot. And so under 49B6, for submission to the voters, you really have 2 options, and I just wanted to talk about those 2 options because we've talked about it a little bit. The default rule is that each amendment is voted on separately. But it says in the alternative, the Charter Commission can vote to have 2 or more of the amendments listed and voted on together. So that would have to be an affirmative decision that this group makes at some point in time to put more than one question together. And then there's some requirements about, that's kind of down the road, but putting the ballot together with the proposed amendments and a copy of the report, a summary, and all that stuff, getting that all prepared for the voters. That's kind of stage 3, which will be sort of after the bulk of the work of this commission is over. Will then some of us and Lyndon and the city folks will figure out how that process happens. That's really the stage 3. So we're in the final parts of stage 2. Do you want me to keep going?
Yes.
So I don't know what you want to focus on today, but I know, Clint, it's not ironic that you're the chair today, and it's been your sort of your thing to talk about ballot questions and pairing them up and putting them in order. And what's really, I'll tell you what, I had this experience. Bill said, it'd be great, Jim, if we could hear from you about what you thought we should do and how could we pair these up. And so I haven't looked at this literally in 3 weeks. I just, I do other stuff, and I cracked it open, and I looked at the 6 questions, the 6 amendments, and honest to goodness, I said, I kind of like them just like 6 questions. Like I kind of feel like they stand alone, each, in their own way, having their own sort of different value and worth. But I wasn't able to so personally, I don't have like, hey, here's what I think you should do. I sort of looked at the 6 and said, as a Concord voter myself, I would feel comfortable and perfectly fine just voting on those 6 questions. And I don't see a natural, easy pairing, because they're all sort of different, and the ones that would naturally fit together subject matter wise don't necessarily go together in terms of politically, some like, yeah, we think the voters will really like, certain things like campaign financing, but we're not sure this other issue will fly through as easily. So let's not pair those together. Let's keep them separate and give everybody a chance to really vote on each one separately. That's where I am kind of personally, that's a decision for you, but I wanted to just say, when I read it, I wasn't able to come up with an obvious logical pairing.
Anybody have a thought here?
Could I, thanks, Jim, and by the way, if all of you have probably got your copy that went to Patrick Taylor, the clerk, and the 3 state officials, and Lyndon was so good to post this on the school district's website. So it's right there for the public to read and see, and
we made copies.
they're available
For
for
the
people
public.
to pick up.
Yeah.
And so I think it is a great document, and I want to thank you, Attorney O'Shaughnessy, for your guidance and help in making it look like such a positive, good product, and it is. I had a chance to talk with Betty Hoadley. This is her first meeting that she's missing because of a personal trip that she's finally taking, which is great. And what Betty said is she was hopeful that we would have a chance to present this preliminary report with the amendments to our school board, and that our school board would have an opportunity to ask questions, to comment, and in fact, I think Betty's intent, and she asked me to say this on her behalf tonight, is going to ask the school board to vote. Now, their vote isn't required by statute, the school board, but I think it's important for Concord voters in the school district to know that the work we've done hasn't kind of come out of left field in a way that causes controversy at the school board. And hopefully what we can do, and Jim, I guess my question to you, just to talk about it a little bit and hear others, is it would be nice to be able to, on the ballot, present these amendments proposals very clearly, like I think that they are, but also let them know that it was a unanimous vote of this Charter Commission. And if we're, everything we've heard from the school board in public testimony so far, from school board members who have attended, has been very favorable. And I would expect that after we answer their questions, we could also get a positive vote out of the school board. But I'd love the voters in Concord to know that. And in fact, if possible, on the ballot. And maybe that's something we can work with the state officials about to see if we couldn't, if we go through this process. Betty's expecting that presentation to happen soon after she returns. And I'm sure she'll let every one of us know so that we can all attend if we'd like to for that. But I just wanted to put that on the table, say thanks, great job. I agree with you, the separate amendments. I don't see any way of combining them. I think that there's going to be 6 votes to be cast for 6 amendments. And I would also like to let people know how hard everyone worked and that people have worked hard enough to come to a common conclusion in favor. That's what I was thinking.
I always hope somebody else is going to speak first, but yeah, I like the questions. I think they're fine. I do have one question about it, which is, we don't inform people in this document, at least that I can see in the sort of summary, or in the questions that or in the amendments that we're making, that we are eliminating the provision in the current charter for review 10 years from now. should that be a separate question? Or does it go into goes into the process actually of, I'm thinking while I'm talking, which is stupid, but I think that in the amendment and update section, I think we should say that we are eliminating that. I don't know if it requires a separate question, something just for us to think about. So I like the questions. That was my only one, my only cautionary note, or question, I suppose. And then, I'm not sure we want to ask the school board for a vote. And the reason for that is it's not part of this process.
Right.
I do think it would make sense to have the school board let us know if they have problems with any of these questions, which then, just like the input from any other public member, we would take into consideration in deciding whether we make any amendments or changes to them.
Can I?
Sure.
The current charter, the very last, I think, the very last page, is where the current Charter Commission is established, so it's Article 25. And so Amendment 2 is to eliminate obsolete provisions, and that provision is so specific to this November 2021 commission that it is, by operation of its specificity, obsolete now. And so our Amendment 2 eliminates that. And in the explanation, we make this like really passing reference to it. It says the current charter includes provisions relating to events occurring a decade ago and to the establishment of this charter commission. It's not, I think that's a good point, Bill, it's not clearly explained. So we could explain it clearly that.
Yeah, and let me say it now that I look at it. There wasn't a provision, am I right on this? There's no provision in the current charter that requires that there be a 10-year review.
Absolutely.
So this was set up, okay, that changes
Yeah.
my view a little bit.
Yeah.
I do think that in the questions, we might just let people know that that's been eliminated. But now, having looked at that, I don't think it requires a question or anything like that.
I like the part about Bill saying we're all in agreement. Aren't you assuming a little bit there, Bill?
I often assume things, yes, but.
I think
no,
you're right, but I thought
But
that
I was saying, based on the testimony we've had from every member of the commission,
Yeah.
the board has come, they've all been very supportive. But
Mhm.
I agree with Bill, that what we should do is present it, maybe not ask for the vote, let the Concord School Board decide what they might do.
Yeah.
I think that's a good, your point about assumptions
Yeah.
is consistent with that.
For this process, they are members of the public.
Yeah, absolutely.
They should give us their views.
We had this conversation, Bill and I did briefly, the notion of trying to put somewhere in the balloting process, or even if it's not on the ballot itself, in the information that the voters get, a clear way of articulating that the vote of this commission was, if not unanimous, practically, I mean, almost unanimous. It's going hopefully to be a unanimous vote, and some way of getting that out there, because I think the average person is going to look at it and say, I don't really understand. I mean, I've read charter commissions in the past, and I've said, I don't really understand this that well, but I trust the people that, you know, I elected, and I see that they were unanimous, and that's encouraging. And in the school and town context, where you have an annual meeting and you have voting on the second Tuesday in March, there's a provision in the statute that allows, and it's very common for there to be a parenthetical at the end of every warrant article that says, you know, the select board or the school board recommends this article. Sometimes that's accompanied by like the tally, so 8-0 by a vote of 8-0. And there will often be a similar provision that says the budget committee, when you have a municipal budget committee, recommends this warrant article. And those anecdotes are powerful for voters, and you hear people talk about them year after year, and The question I would have is the statute specifically authorizes that information to be placed on a ballot. In towns, and the Attorney General's office and Secretary of State's office has some strong opinions about what you can and can't do without specific authorization. So I think we would have to have a conversation with them about what we could do and what we couldn't do. And it's so that's worth exploring if that's something you're interested in doing. It may not be necessary. I'd like to see the last.
We've got a report,
Yeah.
which is the preliminary report of the commission, signed by every member of the commission, with no dissenting report, if you will, or concurring report. And it feels to me like when I'm going to vote, what I want to know is, how do I feel about this particular provision? Not necessarily that all the members of the Charter Commission unanimously approved all of these things. I don't think it would be harmful in the final report, on the page where we have the questions, to have another paragraph that says all of these questions were approved unanimously by the members of the Charter Commission.
And recommended.
Recommend.
Yeah.
Nancy?
Can I ask a question about the voting percentages? So, if we have 6 questions, is each question subject to the 60% of the voters who show up for that election, or is it 60% of the people who answer that question?
It's 60% of the people who answer that question. So the ballots cast total, we need 60% of
I was
those.
concerned that it was, so that if people left a bunch of things blank, how would that affect?
No, it's a good question, but it's 60% of the ballots actually
Cast.
marked, cast, yeah.
Well-
And so
On
when,
that question.
on that question, I mean, this is a wormhole, right? So if you have ballots where they can't determine the intent of the voter, those aren't
Yeah.
counted, blah, blah, blah. So it's all the ballots that are cast on a particular question, they count 60% of
So
those.
if I chose to only vote for 2 of the questions, those are the only 2 that obviously get counted, but it doesn't in any way negatively affect, okay, thanks.
So one question could win 100 to 2 and another could win 5 to 2.
Yeah, exactly, that's what I was trying to.
I don't know if that percentage works, but yeah.
Yeah, okay,
Right.
okay, thanks.
It just occurred to me that we do have to be clear about these questions, because this is a national election.
Absolutely.
And that, by the time people get through the
Yeah,
other candidates and the school board and this,
A great deal depends, as we had talked about, on our tremendous additional, non-official, but perhaps most important member of this commission, who's attended almost every meeting, our journalist from the Concord Monitor. We have to all work together to get, including present to the school board, to get the word out that these are good, relevant, necessary amendments that serve the public interest for teaching kids in Concord. And I hope, I think that's kind of, it's not in the statute, but it's our hardest work with these kind of more technical amendments,
So
making
that-
sure our neighbors know.
yeah, and part of that raises my only hesitancy I have about 6 questions, is I worry about people wading through all of those.
Yeah.
And number 1, and number 2, do we have any say in the order of the questions?
Yes.
Because to me, I mean, this is just me speaking, I'm much more concerned about the answer to some of these questions than I am about, eliminating provisions that are obsolete. I mean, they're all important, but some seem more important to me. And I worry about getting through 6 items after people have the rest of the ballot that they have to deal with and the decisions that they have to make. That's all. But I agree that I don't know how to group these. I'm not sure that there's a natural pairing.
You know, I would have thought that the last question should be remove obsolete references. What the heck do we do
If we don't
if
win
that doesn't pass?
I mean, actually, it doesn't matter. If it doesn't pass, then you've got pages of obsolete references that
guess.
are
They're just
obsolete.
confusing to the public, violating the Professor Lesser rule.
I do think we ought,
Simplicity.
we ought to think about the order of it.
Yeah, I think we should think about the word, and I don't know what.
We have had testimony during our proceedings several times from another unofficial member of this commission, Attorney Russell. And I think his testimony was the real top-notch, bright line, top billing question is making sure that everyone who runs for public office in Concord, including school board members, have to file their financial expenditures reports. And I think that's one that's, I was kind of convinced by that argument, and I think we as a commission shuffled in response to that testimony.
Well, you could group them by what we'll call composition of the school board questions. Not combine them, but just group them that way, and then the other.
I mean, Nancy, I think it's a legitimate concern, but I imagine there's a group of voters who won't even get to,
Bother to look at it.
that they're there to vote for the national election. Maybe they'll get to city council and
Right.
school board, but they're not gonna wade into this. I'm guessing it's fewer people who start and don't finish. So, I
Yeah, I think if you get that far and you
Right.
get started, you'll go through
do the
the
whole
whole
thing.
Yeah.
The six.
I
Six
think-
isn't
Point Kate.
50, but
I think that's a good point.
No, yeah, I think you're either going to do the local elections
Yeah.
and you're going to do all of it, or you're not going to do it.
Well, I'm just encouraged by the fact that the percentage relates to each question. That was my bigger concern. So, that's good.
Well, we know that there will be at least 9 people who vote on the obsolete references.
Right.
And we'll convince the partners in our lives and the important people in our lives.
12, yeah, yeah.
I'll talk to Hansi and see if she.
I make no promises.
The other related thing I'll just point out
Mark
is,
Meadows to move to Concord.
No.
the statute is really, again, it's a New Hampshire statute, so there's always stuff they stick in there, and it could have been done better, but the form of the question is essentially completely dictated by statute, and the question will be something, it says, shall be in substance as follows, which it means you can make small changes, but it essentially has to be, shall the municipality, and you can change the word, for example, municipality, approve the charter amendment reprinted, and then in parens, summarized below. And I'm always puzzled by why they put reprinted or summarized. And so, later on, it says each question shall be followed by the text or a summary of the amendment. So you have a choice, and I think I think you need to have a choice, because if you have a really long amendment, there's no way you're going to put that on a ballot. I think for the most part, we've already made the choice that we're going to do summaries and not the texts
Yeah.
of the amendments. And I just wanted to point that out because, I already sort of know that, but I want to make sure you understand that it's going to be we're going to choose or summary and not
Yeah.
the text.
And that's the way it is done, constitutional amendments that are not printed on the ballot. They're summarized, do you favor home rule or something like that. It's so, that, the way, it's rare when an amendment is actually reprinted,
The
almost
monitor
always or something.
could do everybody a big favor by actually printing the actual amendment in the paper, but,
Yeah.
But we have to also realize that we live in a culture that doesn't necessarily read, so the clearer we can make the summary and the
Yep.
better, and the shorter we can make the summary, the fewest amount of words, the more people are gonna understand it, because our culture doesn't read.
So I have
Yeah.
a question, Jim, about your presentation. Are we drafting the questions in the first instance?
I think we've already, I know Bill and I have already tried, that's where we're going. I mean, so if you notice, the preliminary report starts off with an executive summary, and these are sort of one version of explaining the amendments, and then we have recommendation and explanation, and that's another version. And in the back of my mind, I've been like trying to do the job of like, let's explain it differently, and like and there's slight differences between those two. If you read them, it's almost like we're saying the same thing in different ways to see which sticks. So I have spent way too much time like writing and revising those little explanation paragraphs, like really nitpicking and changing the orders of things so many times to try and make it really clear. But it's not carved in stone, and that I think is sort of the work we want to do next. Is if we want to, if you think it needs to be worded better or differently, or
So my
Following-
suggestion, so go ahead, Bill.
Following on that, I think what you're referring to is on page 6 of the preliminary report, in Roman 2, recommendations and explanations on page 6. It lists Amendment 1, Amendment 2, and those explanations right there, I think the intent, when we were deciding on those, was to take our best shot at the time at what the explanation and summary should be on the ballot. So, right, one piece of work, a process approach, is that we don't discuss this now. We have a public hearing tonight on the preliminary report, which is our final one. But that, as members, we take another good read, with a cup of coffee, and just make sure that we're comfortable with these, yeah.
Can I, and I guess, I think that's a good idea, Bill, and I was also going to say, I don't think it's worth us spending a lot of time wordsmithing
No.
right now until we
I
get
agree.
feedback
Exactly.
and make sure we're all on the right track. I think that would be.
I
good.
agree with you.
I agree, Kate. I was going to actually suggest that we wait until we get that, and then Jim come up with draft questions that we can look at after that, or,
Yeah.
and then send them around to us, we can comment on them.
Yep,
We'll have them in advance of the meeting, and
that's perfectly.
so if it helps and it matters, and I don't mean to discuss this now, if you turn to page 1 of this,
Yeah,
here's in the.
Page 1.
In the executive summary. Just for the sake of putting something out there, not to discuss tonight, but so that others have it to think about, I would reorder these questions as follows. Number 1 would be first. Number 4 would be second. Number 5 would be third. Number 3 would be fourth. Number 6 would be fifth. And number 2 would be sixth.
Say the numbers again, just read the numbers. Number 1 would be,
One is 1. 4 is 2. 5 is 3. 3 is 4. Yeah, 3 is 4. So what's in that cover?
6 is 5.
6 is
6 would be
5.
5, and 2 would be 6.
1, 6, 4, 2, 3, 5.
So that's just a suggestion.
I think it's a good one, but you'll be with that too.
I mean, you could almost combine. We've talked about it. I mean, these were paired up at one point, and then we unpaired them because one was a breeze through and one wasn't. So
The danger of unpairing is that some get voted down or that you vote against, that voters would vote against a particular question because they don't like one half of it.
Yeah.
As opposed to all of it. This requires people to make a choice on a specific issue.
Yep.
I agree.
yeah, I think with a 3/5, you have to do that
Yeah.
unless it's a no-brainer.
Yep, I agree.
It's like findings of fact, Jim.
Yeah, you don't combine them. I get it.
Right. So you're ready for public
So
comment?
where do we go from here?
Public comment?
to the public comment.
Okay.
This is, and Jim, just as you are departing from your spot, if you could just describe again the procedural setting for this final public.
This is just, what did we put in the agenda? Report on preparation of the final, I mean, it's literally just to, now that we have finalized and presented the preliminary report, it's to hear from the community on that before the final report is prepared. So it's like input in preparation and anticipation of the final report, and the commission can hold additional public hearings, but it's not required to under the statute.
Thank you.
When should we schedule that kind of meeting?
The next meeting,
Yeah, the public,
right here, this is it.
I know, I'm so when?
When should we have an additional meeting?
When should we have to have another public here?
We don't.
We
This
don't.
is- this is-
Yeah, no, this is it.
All right, the
So I
last
think the
one.
question
I confused you.
My
Sorry.
recommendation is, we wait until after we've received the public comment tonight, and then we discuss whether we think, as a result of that public comment, we need another meeting to discuss any changes that might be made as a result of the public comment.
Yep.
And we also want to wait to get feedback, right, back from the state before we meet again, so we
I
can
think
deal
that's
with both of those things. Yeah.
So do we have, this is a good, maybe we, I'm sorry, I'm just jumping in, but do you have another meeting scheduled in June? So would the next meeting be like so Tuesday, June 7th, and then just so we know, and then Tuesday, June 14th would be the last two meetings after we hear back from the state and before the final report needs to be complete. So
Remind me again of that date.
the 7th and the 14th of June.
Well,
And you think
what's
those
the
are
date it has to be?
Oh, the 20th.
Okay, that's what I thought.
needed?
So we sort of have to meet.
Two meetings in a minute?
Wouldn't it be better to schedule both and cancel one?
Yeah.
That's what I would just have it there, and
Yeah.
you know, we sort of did that with a preliminary report. I think we will try to get everything done we need to do on the 7th and be done, but if we need the 14th, we need it. And so we can't, yeah, I think that's a good,
Okay.
That's good. So Lyndon, could you help us
Will do.
get that on the book?
I will do that.
Thanks.
right.
Final hearing on Flag Day would be particularly.
I think it's very appropriate,
Right before the last day of school, finish before the school year.
even better.
Right, let me get my stuff out of here.
Thanks, Jim. Great job.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank
The
you.
report is very well put together,
Thank you. Thanks, Lyndon and Bill, honestly. Mask.
So now, we just ask
Mr. Swiker.
who would like to come up.
Am I free to go? Or
You are.
Sir,
All right.
And Mr.
Dismissed.
Swiker is
if we
already,
mess this up, we'll do
Yeah.
it quickly without you.
First on the list, I'm not the last if I could have one of those.
Of course. Yep, they're at the front desk. I think we put that out on the website.
Well, you see, I couldn't find it on the website because I only looked at the Charter Commission website, and not on the main school website.
Charlie, are you first on the list?
I guess if he's gotta get up to speed, I guess so. I kind of anticipated the room might be full, but, I should know better by now.
You should.
Well, I want to thank you all for all your work. 7 months. We'll see what the voters have to say. I guess I'll review some of the tests I had early on what you should be doing, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If you're gonna fix it, is it gonna be an incremental fix that probably ain't gonna sell anyway, or is it, like Bill put them in order, is it the sizzle on the steak, campaign finance reporting? Gee, that's gonna sell really good, I'll tell you that after what happened in Croydon, and people are gonna pay attention, but looking at the questions, you know, Roy Swiker brought some of them up. Tracy brought up campaign finance contributions, and others did as well. Roy brought in making sure you're a resident there, so some people brought that up. I know Bill brought up early on, Bill Glahn brought up going back to at-large elections, and at some point he conceded there really wasn't anybody out there on this side of the table saying, hey, we need to go back to at-large. And so Bill kind of acknowledged, which I thought was pretty good, that that it really wasn't an issue. So, but I look at, and I agree with his numbering of things, if you're going to sell it, there's a thing called, in case you haven't figured out, I'm a political and campaign junkie, there's a thing called ballot drop-off. So what do we got? We got some federal races, we got some state races, we've got some county races. I don't think there's any city elections. And then you actually get, I was a moderator one year back in 1990, you actually give them a separate ballot. So you only have 3 races this year. So you got lots of room to do more than just summaries. I think if you start doing summaries without putting the language out there, I think people are going to say they're trying to put something over. I mean, I think the community already has some distrust for the autonomy of the school board, and you've had some people come in and say that. But I guess my question is, who's the moving force on question 5, amendment to require the Concord School Board to appoint the treasurer and clerk of the school district? I didn't see anybody on this side of the fence that ever said anything, so I guess it's coming from somebody that's involved with the schools. And I asked the question again, and I guess it's pretty easily defeated if it's going to go on the ballot. It would be, what is it about the people of Concord? They're not smart enough to elect a clerk or a treasurer like every other school district in the state of New Hampshire. And I've yet to hear an answer. And I'm not looking for answers, I'm just testifying. You want to speak up later? I suspect it came from you, Bill. But, you know, nobody's pushing that. Nobody's pushing that. And when I look at, and I don't mean to speak inappropriately of learned counsel that just left, but when he gets to his explanation, a lot of these explanations, in his opinion, take 10 lines on number 1, 3 lines on number 2, 7 lines, and then we get to question number 5, and we go 7 lines on his April 15th letter. And then we go a whole page. We have to justify a whole page on why we want to do this. And then we go on to that 3rd page. So why does it take a page and a half to justify something that nobody brought up before this commission? You know, so I mean, I think it further isolates the school district from the people by taking away their vote. Real simple. Whether somebody wants to run an ad or put it on the radio or on TV. Charter Commission wants to take your right to vote for people to represent you on the school board or on the school district. No reason has been given why we should do that, other than from 1961 to 2010, that's what it was. And then the people voted in what's there now. Again, incremental change. Is there any reason to change it? Number 6, you know, I raised the issue that what is it, sections 18 and 20, charter revision, were extremely long and obtuse, but I looked at 49B and it's even worse. And 49B, which you all can print off, basically it's entitled the Home Rule Municipal Charters, and here it is. I didn't print it all, but I got 10, 15 pages here. Has that made it any more simple? And then it says, when you look at definitions, it doesn't say a darn thing about schools. That municipality means city or town. Governing body means selectmen, board of aldermen. Has nothing to do with schools, nothing at all. And I'm not sure. We'll see what the state says. But one person who campaigned, I went back and looked at Patch, and I think it was you, Bill Ardinger, that said, we want to do something that goes to plain English. It's plain and simple and the people will understand it. Well, nobody's used that revision process, but there's an awful lot of legalese. And, you know, I've been an attorney over 45 years, and I've revised things, but, you know, the people of Concord didn't elect you to hire an attorney to do your job. That there's an awful lot of legalese here that I can begin to understand maybe as an attorney, but Six-Pack Joe or your average voter out there isn't going to be able to understand it. So I'm not sure 49B is going to pass muster with the state. I had occasion at some point to deal with the Secretary of State's office, and I just happened to show him what was in the old charter about how back in 2012 they wanted to lobby and change things. He looked at it and said, "Hey, it's unconstitutional to do what you're doing. I don't know what the opinion's going to be." I just showed it to him. I says, "Hey, I'm going in front of the Charter Commission." So again, it does, if everybody else in the state can elect it. Another issue I have is, I'm not sure the Charter Commission authorizes any lobbying of the Attorney General's office or the Secretary of State to try and pass laws to change things. Bill, you are right. You shouldn't run this past the school board. School board probably doesn't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. You can go do it privately if you want. But, is that going to, that's campaign activity. Let's get the school board to go 100% behind what we're doing. So each of you are members, and don't get overtaken by legalese. I mean, I looked at the whole charter here, and page 9 of the charter, which is section 20, paragraph 5, says nothing about hiring an attorney to do the job. It says, talks about various things, full text explanation to change, and a written opinion by an attorney admitted to the bar that the charter is not in conflict with the Constitution and general laws. One man's opinion might be that this whole proceeding got hijacked by a couple of attorneys and an attorney that was hired before there should have been an attorney. He should have only been brought in at the end. Did good work, but I'm not sure the people of Concord in the $4,000 that was, you hired him, so I don't know the terms of it, and he's an excellent attorney. But anyway, so I mean, each of you have a separate vote, and there's also a provision in the charter to issue a minority report, and to sit here and say, we have to have unanimity, everybody has to be for this. No, that isn't how this situation works. Go down the hill to the legislature, go to the city council, School boards had a few more 5-4 votes than it's had in the past. So each of you have a separate opinion, and, realize what a voter is going to understand and what they're going to think. But, I mean, I advocate setting a stipend. I understand why you don't put stipends in constitutions or in charters, but you can right or wrong by saying we're going to make it $2,500, and then you can do what you want. You can amend the last chapter. You don't have any provisions for a new charter commission. You could amend on the current charter paragraph 14 of 14. You can change a couple words there, actually numbers. It says 2021 Charter Commission established. All I have to do is change that second 2 to a 1. 2031 Charter Commission established. Then it says November 2021. I think you can change the words I think you can change 4 2s to 3s, and we can have another Charter Commission. And I'm a little concerned that shifting to 49B may have a lot more implications and make it more difficult to either amend or revise the charter. Is there a reason to get away from what's there? Yes, it's awfully confusing. You have to be a Philadelphia lawyer to understand it. So I hope all of you exercise your independent vote. Maybe you go out and talk to some people, because they're obviously out standing in the doorway waiting to get in. But I appreciate your work, and I have been told I shoot from the hip, and I pretty much told you like it is as I see it, but and Roy Schweiker will tell you too.
You did, Charlie, and you've always told us what you're thinking,
Thank you, I appreciate it.
and we appreciate
I'm going
it.
to withhold my comments on Mr. Russell's comments until Mr. Schweiker has testified.
Yeah. Mr. Swiker?
I Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, I'm going to make the most amazing statement you've heard all this evening. And that is, I agree with Mr. O'Shaughnessy and Mr. Ardinger that putting the 6 as separate items is a very smart thing to do because they don't really combine and people should vote on them separately. On the other hand, I will disagree. I think we have several retired educators on this commission, and I would let them write the questions, both the question on the ballot and the explanation, because we let the lawyers do it, it'll only make them more confusing. Educators are paid to make people understand things. Lawyers are paid to confuse things. So I don't think we should have the lawyers writing the ballot questions or the explanations. I think that Mr. Russell was correct. We shouldn't have had the attorney all the way through. He was supposed to be hired at the end to review what we did instead of trying to run the whole proceeding himself. So anyway, that's my opinion about the questions, is let the educators write them and not the lawyers. And I will speak about 3 of the particular things. I don't know if I send something to the Charter Commission, how long it takes for you people actually to see it. Earlier today, I sent my wording for the thing I thought should be on the salary of the school board members. Did anyone see it?
Ray, I was here until 4:15. I didn't receive that email.
Well, it may have been after 4:15. I'm not sure.
Well, I do leave at a certain time. I came down to set up the room and left for the day.
Okay, but anyway, my point being that maybe you will see it tomorrow and forward it
Yes.
to everybody.
Absolutely.
Sure.
But anyway, the one that's in here I think is highly bad. I said that last time, but I went to the trouble of writing my own version. And that is, it said you should only do it every 2 years, which, since the school board members are elected every year, I think you should have the opportunity to change the salary every year. I think that saying it will be done at the September meeting is a mistake. I think you should give the school board flexibility. I mean, in a way, don't you think the salary of the school board is just part of the school budget and maybe it should be included in the regular budget process? So, let them do it as long as it's done before October 1st in whatever method they like. So that's 2 of the things. The third item is, I'm proposing that anyone who is elected to the school board gets the same salary for 3 years. And the reason is that because you have this cycle where only some people turn over every year, in effect, some people are voting themselves a raise before the next election. In fact, 2/3 of the members are voting themselves a raise before the next election. And so I'm saying that whatever the amount is when you come in, you keep that for 3 years. And that may mean that there's 3 different amounts being paid school board members. On the other hand, if you consider there are teachers who are basically doing the same job, how many different steps for teachers are in the school or in the Concord School District, even though they essentially are doing similar work? I don't think having 3 different steps for the school board members is hard. And the other thing is, the salary is not necessarily going to increase every year. Let's say one year it was voted up to $10,000 and the public got mad and they came in the next year and voted it back down to $1,000. Then the advantage of having the same salary every 3 years is when you get elected, you know what your salary is going to be for 3 years. And other people on the board can get more, they can also get less. But anyway, the point is, they know what it is. And hopefully, at some point, this email will be circulated. I mean, I didn't know she had to do it manually. I thought maybe there was, a mailer that automatically distributed. But anyway, so that has to do with that one. The next one is to appoint the clerk and treasurer. Yes, I know perfectly well who it was that has made this a major issue, but I half agree with it. I don't think the voters should be electing the clerk and treasurer. It would make more sense if they elected the superintendent, if you think about it. And what do the clerk and treasurer really have to do with running the school district? And I think there are places they elect a superintendent, but I mean, I'm not proposing that. But I object to the way it's worded, and once again, I said that the very first day, and I'll keep saying it till we get this process done, and that is, you should say that the school board determines how they're appointed rather than that they will appoint them. It may be, for instance, that the superintendent will nominate them and the school board will approve them. And that's how it's done with the superintendent, who, once again, I would say is arguably more important to the district than the treasurer, not that I'm trying to insult anybody. So, let the school board decide how to get them. Of course, they have to do it in a way that's legal, which is the problem right now of whether it's legal to have them appoint them or not. But anyway, so that'll take care of itself. And the very last one has to do with this 49B. And this is where I'm highly disappointed with our legal team. That apparently, if we go to 49B, we're required to then elect the Charter Commission at large. And this was not made clear to us until we got into the question period last time around. It would seem that that would be a very upfront thing. If we go to 49B, no more at large Charter Commission, no more by ward Charter Commission, they've all got to be at large. And that wasn't said, and in fact, it still isn't said in this description of the articles, which I would say is a very significant change. I don't know how important it is to elect the Charter Commission by ward. Just people here seem to think it was a good idea, but yet somehow the legal people changed it without telling you until it came up in the questions. And if you look at the minutes, right here, it says that some of the people suggested that there be a report on, whether this is actually required. And I noticed we didn't get that tonight. So Mr. Russell seems to think we're not required to use 49B. We may not even be allowed to. But certainly that was part of the report that we should have got tonight, is how does this 49B relate to the Concord School District? So that's a big key missing item. And the other thing, once again, I sent around an email right after the last meeting, and once again, I don't know how many of you ever saw it, that said that we need to find out whether 49B really applies to the city, because if it does, this Charter Commission is illegal, because it wasn't elected at large. So if we really have to abide by 49B, then you folks have been wasting your time, because anything you do is irrelevant. And I suggested that maybe we contact some legislator to approve this rump Charter Commission. I don't know if anyone's bothered to do that. And the other way, of course, to do it is, since the school board is allowed to submit charter amendments, you could ask Mr. Richards whether, as a favor to make things legal, whether he would get the school board to vote to propose the exact same amendments as the Charter Commission. So if the Charter Commission is ruled illegal, they'll still be on the ballot, and people can still vote on them. But, I mean, that's a key missing item, I think, that they were supposed to look into, and they didn't, is whether 49B really applies, and if it does, is this commission legal? And if it doesn't, then maybe we want to make the significant change of sticking with our former thing that allowed the Charter Commission to be elected by ward instead of going to 49B. See, I had another note here somewhere. I guess that's about enough. I've talked long enough. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Swiker. We appreciate your input.
I'm going to sign in. I'm Lyndon Jackett. I'm a resident of Concord. And I just wanted to make two very small comments. One is just to refute Mr. Russell. The Charter Commission may adopt rules and regulations governing the conduct of its meetings and proceedings and may employ such legal research, clerical, or other employees and consultants as are deemed necessary within the limits of its budget. So you are totally entitled to have hired an attorney for the time frame and purpose that you did. And in response to two comments by Mr. Schweiker, I like that the resolution regarding regulating campaign contributions, the amendment, is to require the school board to adopt a resolution. The school board makes its ordinances, called resolutions in this case, by board action. I like that. And the same is true for the stipend amounts. I think it's torturous to add the charter, all of the details Mr. Schweiker was discussing about stipends and timing of stipends and change of stipends. Let the board do that by resolution. I think that takes care of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Lyndon. Bill?
So I'm sorry Mr. Russell left. Let me, however, take up Mr. Schweiker's last comment about the alleged unconstitutionality of this Charter Commission. The current Concord Charter allows Charter Commission, whose members shall be elected at the regular school district election. That's in section 25(1). 25(2) says the Charter Commission shall consist of 9 members who shall be elected in accordance with section 21B, 20(1)B. And that specifically says that, it's on page 10, or I'm sorry, page 9 of the current charter, that how they shall be elected, which is consistent with the ward voting process. The current means of amending the charter both had a proposal for a new charter, but it also had a proposal consistent with 49B. I would add, if there's any question about whether the statute itself applies to this body, you could simply write an amendment provision that says the amendment will be drafted in accordance with the statute, or any revision would be proposed and adopted in accordance with the provision that applies to municipalities, and you'd be done. The reason we incorporated 49B was because that's exactly what the current charter tried to do. And then any change in the language of that would be inconsistent with the law. So, but let me go back to Mr. Russell. So I just want to say this publicly. The idea that the fix was in on this because the lawyers in the room are the smartest people in the room, and therefore can bully all the non-lawyers into agreeing to this. I'll use a current term. It's malarkey. We didn't lobby the Attorney General's office. We went to the Attorney General's office to explain our position on why something should be done. The idea, so first of all, it doesn't matter who proposed the issue of whether the district clerk should be elected or appointed. But let's remember how we got to where we are. We got to where we are because in the last go-around when the charter was sent back, we had always appointed the clerk and the treasurer, and the Secretary of State's office at the last minute said, no, you can't do that. We wanted not to have that process then, we being the last Charter Commission, and only because the Secretary of State at the time didn't allow us enough time to make that decision, we had to go with what was supposedly required, that we think is not required by the statute and is not wise. So the idea that this was cooked up in a back room and that people didn't have a chance to provide their input on why election or appointment would be a good or a bad idea is baloney. And I've listened pretty respectfully to Charlie over the last X number of weeks, and I think accusations at this point in the game are not the right process. And I don't think the decision that we have reached on any of these issues was carefully reached after input from everyone in this room. Sometimes people change their views on things because of opinions that were offered by what we'll call, for the sake of this conversation, non-lawyers. And sometimes their comments brought people who were lawyers and might have had a slightly different perspective on things because they were around to their position. So I just wanted to make those points because I think Charlie's comments were untoward and inappropriate.
I'd like to say something too. Charlie commented about the voters should have some say on the people who represent this community. I was on the school board for 10 years, and nobody appointed me to the school board. I ran in an election. Tom ran an election. Nancy ran. We were voted by the people of Concord. There was no funny business.
Don't forget me, Charlie.
Yeah, oh, that's right. Bill was elected.
I ran and I got elected and unelected and elected and unelected.
Yeah. We all got different things like that. But the fact that the attorneys want to change whether we have an appointed or elected treasurer or council. In the first Charter Commission, we went through all of this, and having elected treasurer and clerk didn't fit what we'd done for all the years previous to that, and it wouldn't fit how we did things. So what we had to do for the last 10 years is run someone as the clerk and someone as a treasurer. I was 3 years the treasurer. Tom's our current treasurer. I got $300 a year stipend, and I spent a lot of time going in and checking out the numbers for the community that elected me. I don't ever go in, and neither does Tom, and it's not a position we need to. What if one of these crazy people from Creighton came in and got elected treasurer? And it's easy to do because no one runs. And they could just start blowing things up. Doesn't fit our system. So whatever they're saying has nothing to do with Bill Ardinger trying to pull up something or any of the attorneys on the committee. It has to do with what works for our Concord school system.
I'd be the first person to admit that Bill Ardinger is underhanded and crafty.
Yeah.
But not in this particular instance. And I think Clint, you hit the nail on the head. We went around it, around and around and around. Too much mischief can occur when people have the opportunity. And I'm all in favor of people having more voting authority than less in most instances, but not for clerical positions in which presumably we elect a school board. We give them authority over a multi-million-dollar budget. And we're going to allow somebody who's elected where people have no sense of that to undermine the entire budget? Not a great idea.
For sure. Thomas.
So I guess I'm a bit offended by accused of
I agree, Tom.
and I can tell you a couple of things, that anyone who reads our minutes will know that there was tremendous discussion about a lot of items and fair discussion. And I think I've made public before my feeling about this committee and how everybody listens to everybody. And it's been just a great working committee. So for my 2 cents worth, that's what I'd like to have on the record. And I never have felt like I've been pressured into making any sort of vote. Thank you.
Thanks, Thomas.
I've said too much. Could say one other thing. I do agree with Mr. Schweiker on at least one point. I think we ought to at least think about, in practicality, whether I agree with Lyndon that I don't think we want to be too precise about this issue of stipends, but maybe we just think a little bit again about how that process might play out. It sounds like maybe our decision has been, that's a school board's problem, not ours.
Yeah.
And I'm fine with that.
Bill.
Thanks, and I agree with Tom. This experience of working with all of you on this commission has been wonderful. I feel like I've met new neighbors and have new friends, and it's just, it's been a great experience. And so I think that any comments about the process that don't reflect the positivity and the openness and the transparency that actually happened shouldn't be given much credence. On the issue of the appointment, I think Clint said the issue right. The last Charter Commission unanimously voted to continue the practice of appointing treasurer and secretary. It was at the last minute in this process that a surprise came. The number one thing to remember is that every city in this state on the city side and appoints their treasurer and secretary. They don't elect them. Small towns with school districts that have a town meeting They do. But when you've got a lot at stake, like a school system that's as large and as sophisticated as this one is, taking care of so many kids, it is not the town model that should govern, in my view. And that's the same view that was unanimous on the past commission and that we've all experienced here. So in fact, it is misleading to think, Charlie asked the question, no explanation has been given for why the appointment, and we changed it. That's as if he hadn't sat here through all the discussions, because it is absolutely clear that the reason is that those two positions should be part of our governance structure through our elected school board's leadership, just like it is in every city in the state that has city councils, like the city of Concord. Their treasurer and clerk are appointed because the statute requires it. And so what we're asking for is to treat a complex, large, public school system in a city the same way the others are. And I think that frankly, I'm confident the state officials will end up giving us a fair hearing on that.
I think what
And I guess one other thing is, on the point about that there might be some question about the status, the validity of this commission. The last charter went through the Secretary of State and process, and no one said anything about the election. The issue is that may have been an oversight. And so what we talked about openly here, and I heard it was fully explained at the last meeting. I don't know if Mr. Schweiker was here, but it was fully explained that the statute clearly says, and I think the quote was from Tracy, well, you can't get any clearer than that. And I don't know, Mr. Schweiker may not have been there for that exchange, so he may not have heard it, but it was very clear, and I think we are very legally created. There's no question about that in my mind. And the answer that we came to is a good reflection on what the spirit of the law requires. Thank you.
I think, Bill, what Charlie was really saying is no one from the public, he didn't say it this way, no one from the public brought that issue forward for this commission in this proceeding. However, the last Charter Commission did. And not every item that we discussed was brought forward by a member of the public. There's nothing that prevents members of this commission from saying, what if we change the charter this way? Should we do that? So it's all just, when you don't like the substance of something, you challenge the procedure.
Right.
And I think Charlie's done a good job during this process of bringing forward questions perhaps over and over again. But to now, at this point in the game, challenge the bona fide nature of the people on this Charter Commission, to me, was just inappropriate.
It was.
I would like to say something about the actual ballot itself that Mr. Schweiker and Mr. Russell brought up. One, that we have a whole page, because we do get a separate one on one of those wards where not everybody gets to vote on this charter. But I disagree that we should put the whole amendment on it. I think we need to make the language as clear as possible, which I've been saying all along. And I do agree with that we should clarify the language. And that should be our goal, to be clear, concise, and to,
Does that mean you want to draft it, Tracy? You
I
are a teacher.
I will take a stab at removing the legalese if anyone
That's good.
wants to
That's good.
give me that opportunity. That was all I have.
And I think that, I want to say I agree with you on everything you said. And in the preliminary report, the language of the proposed amendment is clearly presented two ways. One with the black line version and one with, so any voter in Concord who would like to see the actual language simply has to see Linden and get a copy or go on the website. So it's very available to get that. But on the ballot, I agree with you. And most ballot questions, in my experience for state constitutional changes, they don't include the text of the amendment. For exactly the reason you said.
I don't know how much time we'll spend trying to figure out how to get this information to the community at large. We've discussed that before. And I think it might be something while we're reading your newspaper or whatever you're doing, you think about a good way. I was thinking our PTOs could email the entire, well, not so much the report, but at least the questions and the explanation to all the families in our community. And then the monitor will hit some. And, if you guys have any other creative ideas, it would be nice for people to see a ballot before they walked in there. Anyway, great job.
Could I, maybe just because we addressed this before, I didn't hear any comments tonight that have caused me to say we should go back and relook at these questions and decide whether we want to change them. So from my perspective, I don't believe we need another meeting of this commission before the final, before the comments come back into the final report.
I agree with Greg.
And that's when we're meeting, right, Lyndon?
I'll send out an email reminding people of the dates and I'll post
Okay.
it.
Thank you all.
I move to adjourn.
Without you guys on Tuesday night.
I know it.
Do we need a motion to adjourn?
We do.
Need one.
Oh, you
second it?
Second.
All those in favor?
Hi.
You guys tell Betty I passed.
You did great.
She'll probably call you tonight.
Yeah. Well, not call, but.